Good afternoon, students. And so this week is already week 9. So there are only 3 more weeks left to this class. Can you believe there's only 3 more weeks left to this class? And then you're done. Okay, by March 31st, that's your Thursday, March 31st, is already your last day of class. And so you guys have to hand in everything by Thursday, March 31st, midnight. So starting next week, I'm going to start announcing to everybody the last day of class. So are you excited that this class is just about over? Yeah? So you're like, yeah, I can't wait until this class is over, and then I can, I can get on with other stuff. You get that much closer to graduation. So how many more classes do you have to take before you graduate?
This is just the first semester for me, so I've got a long way to go.
Oh, okay. So are you enjoying your first semester?
So far, so good. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so let's start today's lecture since it's a long one again. So here we go. Let's see. All right, so today's lecture, let's see if I could get this to work correctly this time. New slideshow from beginning. This time I got it to work correctly. So today's lecture is going to be about what is a persuasive essay. So before I go over that, I want to go over some week 9 mistakes. So when do we use APA? So a lot of students have forgotten to use their APA. Mainly they forgot to either put in their reference citations or they forgot to put in their the Intext citations. So Intext citations go inside the body of the paper. And so if you are citing a source directly, you need to write the author's name, the date, and the page number. And we always use APA inside our paper when we have any kind of numerical information like statistics, percentages, dollars and cents. If we're talking about dates or time, historical information, medical information, financial information, or any kind of uncommon knowledge. And so when you write your persuasive essay post, make sure you have at least 3 paragraphs. That's the minimum. Place your thesis as the last sentence of the first paragraph. Use APA in-text citations at least once per paragraph. So the last 3 students I just corrected today did not have in-text citations, and the last student I corrected didn't even have reference citations. And so in-text citations, as I said before, occur inside the body of your paper, and reference citations occur after your paper. And so make sure you have that, and also your reference citation should match your in-text citation. So let's say I have Patrick Smith is one of my sources. Well, then inside the paper, there should be an in-text citation that says Smith 2002. And then Jones, 2012. Well, then inside the paper, there should be a Jones 2012. So that your in-text citations should match your reference citation. So you should have 2 sets of citations, one inside the paper and one at the end of the paper. If you only have reference citations at the end of your paper and nothing inside your paper, you did it wrong. Okay, so avoid simply agreeing, and when you write your post to other students, avoid just saying, hey John, that was a great essay. And so this is just to repeat. You want to tell John, you're missing your thesis statement, you're missing a conclusion. Or you could say, you could use this APA in-text citation. You're missing and since most people are missing their APA in-text citations, that's a giveaway. I'm giving away to everybody. That's something you can say to each other. Hey, John, you're missing your in-text citations. Since half a dozen people I just graded are missing either one or the other. And so another thing that you can do in posting to other students is you can you can comment about what you've been reading about, like the class reading, the interactive lectures. And so what I've done is I recorded myself narrating the interactive lectures. So if you don't like to read, you can listen to my interactive lectures. I put all my recordings on the home page. And so the recordings range in time from 2 minutes to 30 minutes. So the least you could do is you could say, hey, did you listen to the videos, and what did you like best? You could ask each other questions about the reading. Or if there's something you don't understand about the reading that you want me to explain more, you can also post that in the in the Week 9 forum. So it's not just about peer review, but you could also talk about your reading. You could talk about the progress in your paper. If there's some feedback that I gave you that you don't understand, you could also question, and so on and so forth. And also you could play the grammar game if you're so inclined. You can deliberately give someone a bad error and then have everybody correct it. Okay? In other words, you give someone a incorrect sentence, like "I is a student." Then you ask the other students, "What's wrong with that sentence?" And have everybody guess and see, oh, it's subject-verb agreement. Correct. Just like you did with a food game. So this is just to keep it interesting. So it's not just, "Hey, John, great paper. Hey, Susan, great paper. Bye," and that sort of thing. So I see people flying by like that, and that does not advance the conversation. So that's what you could do for Week 9. So in your APA in-text citation, make sure each in-text citation is less than 3 lines. If it's more than 3 lines, then you need to do a block citation. Here's an example of percentages. About 51% of students who couldn't finance school dropped out of school. And so here you have 51%, then you need to write Smith 2020 and 22. Oh, good afternoon, Lisa. I didn't see you.
Hi.
In Tennessee, and here's another example of an in-text citation. In Tennessee, its applications for student loans decreased by 17% in the first year of school, and with the loan amounts decreasing by 12%, and so on. So all these percentages and numbers all require Smith 2020-22. And so I'm seeing a lot of people not putting in text citations. 81% of teenagers are on social media, so you need APA for percentages. And then a Credit Karma survey found 63% of people don't have any believe that financial literacy should be part of a school's curriculum. I think that learning about financial literacy and learning how to fill out your taxes and learning to do your own laundry, I think is more important than algebra, but don't say that to the math teacher. Anyway, most parents and grandparents failed when it came to financial decisions and knowledge. Generations will continue this cycle because they are not taught financial literacy. They're self-taught. While 37% said their parents taught them about finances, 12% said they learned about personal finance from teachers. So I remember when I was in school, the only thing I learned about finance was economics is about supply and demand, and that's it. And then beyond that, I don't remember anything else, and I learned it on my own. So when you have all these percentages, you should also put in the author, the date, and the page number. So when we put the in-text citation inside the body of the paper, right after the percentages, that's known as an in-text citation. And we don't need to put in everything else. I had one student write, Dr. Smith, put in the entire thing, and you don't have to put in the entire thing except at the very end of your paper. And so here you would use an in-text citation when studies have found that 20 minutes of playing video games can cause people to become less psychologically aroused by real violence. And so people become desensitized. So here you would have, since you're stating it takes 20 minutes of video games, how do you know that 20 minutes of video games makes you more violent? Well, obviously someone did research. That's why you have to cite the source. Here's some more medical information. So if you're writing about medical information, you also have to cite the source. You have to cite here Smith 2020-22. Alcohol releases endorphins. It's the body's natural painkiller and is associated with pleasure and reward. Alcohol gets to the reward portion of the brain, etc. So when you're talking about medical stuff, you need to then put in. But one thing is both these quotes are too long. Notice how it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So if you have this many lines, then you need to indent. Normally when you indent for a paragraph, you indent 5 spaces. But if you indent for a block quotation, you have to indent 10 spaces. And then it's single spaced, while the rest of your paragraph is double spaced. And so I try to, and you don't have to use quotations for a block quotation. So if you have a long quotation like this, you need to have a block, that's called a block quotation. And I try to discourage students from using block quotations because I think that block quotations disrupt the flow of the essay, so that you should keep your in-text citations to less than three lines per citation. Also, you could use APA for historical information. Secondly, freedom of speech has given voice to those once looked down upon by society. Persons, people who are black, who are in the LGBTQ community, there was a history when these people were silenced and they were never seen as relevant. Freedom of speech is what allowed great individuals like Nelson Mandela and Marcus Garvey to. Anyway, so he's talking about historical information, and you need to cite the source. Here's more financial information that needs citing. In Ohio, the wage is $8.80, and that's $17,600 a year. Average monthly rent in Ohio is $900 a year. And someone did the math and said that today, if you want to afford rent, you have to make at least $50 an hour in order to be able to afford rent and live in a nice place. Obviously, $8.80 is not $50 an hour. Someone did the math in today's whatchamacallit. So anyway, when you cite dollars and cents, you also need to cite the source. So this is an example of citing the source using dollars and cents. And legal information. Did you know that it is legal in all 50 states to carry a concealed handgun? Some states require a permit, people to obtain a permit where others do not. However, in the state of Florida, you must obtain a license. So here you need APA for legal information. And then for dates. In 2018, a man opened fire at a back-to-school event in Titusville, Florida, where over 100 children and adults were attending. So as soon as I say in 2018, then I need to cite the source. Okay, so these are some examples of when we cite sources. And then if we use an abbreviation, so the first time we use the abbreviation, we need to.
You're dragging me into your friend's imaginary disaster.
Well, pardon me for caring about the people in my life.
Look, bad things happen, okay? And I know we have had our share, but you can't walk around living in fear.
You think
Carolyn, your mic is on.
Do what? I'm sorry.
Your mic is on.
Okay, let me fix it. Where's it at? Sorry about that.
Okay, all right.
Is it
So
off now?
yeah. So now it's better. Yeah. So if the first time you use an abbreviation, you need to write out the abbreviation. What else? And here you have more examples of medical information. Obesity is preventable because lack of exercise, so you need APA. And also, here's an example of someone who overwhelmed the reader with too many statistics in one paragraph. You can't live off of minimum wage. The current federal minimum wage is $7.25 and hasn't been raised in 10 years. If someone were to work 40 hours a week, making $7 an hour, they would make a gross pay of $1,060 a month. Is that enough to live off of? Definitely not. People have families to provide for, and unfortunately, a lot of people can't qualify for government assistance. Raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour would take 1.3 million children out of poverty. The wage hasn't kept up with economic productivity. It would be $24 an hour if it had. Well, it's more like $50 an hour. But anyway, 30 years, and the average pay gap between a CEO was 39-1 today, and so on. More than 25% of workers would see an increase in pay, and that is 40 million workers. And so then this is a bit long, so you would need your own block cite quotation in order to fit all of this in. And so this could be its own this entire thing could be one entire essay, okay, in which you're talking about we need to raise the minimum wage, all right? So this whole thing could actually be one whole essay. And also use only one in-text citation. This is also another example of somebody with too many in-text citations. She has 62%, 77%, 38%. She should only have the one 77%, and then just write 5 sentences about that one 77%, okay? So that way, if you use only one in-text citation per paragraph, then you don't overwhelm the reader. And also a very common mistake is people who just leave me websites in their reference citations. And that's also not correct. So this person is missing the last name, the first name, that sort of thing. So this is the correct reference citation that I want to see. I want to see the author's name, the date, the article name, name of the website, retrieved on what date, and then you write the web address last. And so every single reference citation should look like this, okay? I don't want to see something like that, which I'm still seeing to this day. Here's somebody's, this person did some of it right, some of it wrong, like this one. That's correct. But this one, this one, this one, this one, and all of these with the X, the person only gave me a web address. So I need to have the Smith, Patrick, date, and so on and so forth for the full address in order for it to be correct. All right, and so that's a typical mistake. And so before we finish this section, so Lisa, what is APA?
I don't know what it stands for, but I know that, I mean, it's this type of citation, it's this type of way to write a paragraph. It's like a formal writing for education, but I think I missed the very beginning on what exactly APA was, but I mean,
Yeah.
there's different forms of these types of formal writing, for whether it be for submitting school papers, things like that, but this is a certain type of format for that.
Yes, so I think I did not say that APA stands for American Psychological Association, and it's used in business and social sciences. And we use APA to avoid plagiarism. We give credit to the researcher. In other words, how did you come up with all those numbers? You know, the percentages, the dates, the medical facts. Well, some researcher spent years, you know, of his life doing research, and I'm going to be in my week 11 lecture, I'm going to go over how to write a science paper, and you're going to see for yourself as I go over the different steps of how to write a science paper, how much work it takes to write a science paper, how much work it takes to come up with that one little percentage or that fact, okay, which comes from the results of the experiment. So that's why we use APA to avoid plagiarism, in order to acknowledge all of that work that researcher did for just to get that fact. So Jamila, have you used APA before?
Yes, ma'am, but well, I thought I was using APA, but I was doing these citations incorrectly because I would just put the website, like you said, you know, without the extra information. So
yeah, that's a very common mistake across many different students, including this class, as well as people who are even on this call. Do you know anybody, Anil, who would make that kind of mistake? Just putting a lot of web addresses. Yeah, and so
me personally, I'm the one making the mistake.
yeah. So I was saying everybody makes that mistake. A lot of the ones in which I showed before came from a previous class. That's just how common it is, that I could give you 100 such examples. So it's very common. Have you found APA easy to use, Anil? Is it easy to use?
Yeah, it is. I mean, well, I'm using it with a lot of other classes as well. So, you know, like, and you especially mentioned, instead of just going on the web on Google and trying to find things, go to Google Scholar, so then you can find the actual proper accredited URLs where you can get the right information from. So
yeah, because when you get Google, you also get a lot of advertising. That's the difference.
yeah,
You get a lot of hits for Prevagen or something like that. You know, like you take Prevagen and it's going to better life, better brain. I've seen the commercial a gazillion times.
Yeah.
So you don't want to get commercials. All right, so week 9 forum Netiquette. So the reason why I go over this briefly is feel free to write about controversial subjects. In other words, if we all agree to disagree, if you see something that you violently disagree with, we don't attack the student. So I always have to go over this. We don't say, what are you, stupid or something? Why would you believe in something like, we don't behave like that. That's called netiquette. So we agree to disagree. We be polite. We be courteous. And after all, it's a free country. Everybody's got a right to their opinion, right? Even if it's opposite to yours. That's why freedom of speech. So that's why I go through. And the teaching objective in the Week 9 forum obviously is not to attack other students for their opinions, but simply to learn how to write persuasively so you can get your way in the world. That's what everybody wants. I see people smiling. Yeah, I get my way. Yeah, that's definitely what the kids want too. And we want to focus also on fixing essay structure errors and grammar errors. And if you can focus on just the writing, we'll all do great and we'll all improve our writing, which is why we're all here. So we're all acting as one team, and we only got how many more? One more forum to go. Is it one more? Yeah, one more forum after this, and you guys are done. And so getting your way. So now we're going to start the actual topic. So after learning how to persuade people, you have to use pathos, logos, and ethos. Ethos means that in order for you to have a persuasive argument, you have to have ethos, which is credibility. You have to have pathos, which is appeal to emotion. You have to have logos, which is appeal to logic. If you're missing any one of those Aristotle appeals, then your argument becomes not very good, or a fallacy, or not credible. So an example would be fear-mongering. So if I were to say, if you don't do such and such, then the world is going to end because of such and such. Like, so that's fear-mongering. That's only appealing to pathos, and you're missing logos, logic, and you're missing credibility, experts, and all you're appealing to is just someone's raw emotion. That makes that argument we don't believe in. Okay, so that becomes a fear-mongering fallacy. There's actually a name for it. So when we have a good argument, it has to have all three of those elements. So whenever you look at someone's paper or anything you read in the newspaper, you think to yourself, does this argument have ethos, credibility, meaning is it written by an expert, pathos, does it appeal to my emotions and have good descriptive language, logos, is it logical, does it have good grammar and a thesis statement and good essay structure. So that's what we've been learning in this class, is logos mainly. Pathos we did as the Week 3 forum, and ethos we're going to do next week when we study how do we find credible sources. So you need to have all three of them to have a good argument. And persuasive writing occurs everywhere, in billboards, in TV ads, business letters, everywhere. Even when your teenager says, I want to stay up past curfew, and she's giving you a good persuasive argument, okay, to do that. So that's also persuasive. You could also persuasive argument is writing for social justice. In other words, some teachers teach writing just to get their kids, their students, to learn how to write about social justice issues. It's called writing for social justice. And in this class, we're learning more about writing skills. So those are the two teaching objectives for teaching students persuasive writing. And then advocacy writing. Advocacy writing is similar to writing for social justice. In other words, social justice on medical issues that concern nurses. So this is advocacy writing that if you were to write for the public and you were to advocate that nurses should have shorter hours, or nurses should have that sort of thing. So that's persuasive writing for nurses, all right? And so you can advise new nurses on better practices. We went over this in Week 4. You can write about what you feel about your emotions as a nurse, and you can write that in something called nursesjournal.org. Because it's a journal written by nurses for other nurses. So if you don't know what it is to write as a nurse, you can go to that journal, read other people's articles, and you think to yourself, I could write something like that too, and advocate for what I believe in. So that's something you can look into. Right now, you're just in the foundational, just look at it. And also, I write my blog where I write about things in which I give tips to other teachers. So that's persuasive writing. So, Jamila, have you done any kind of advocacy writing for nurses?
Oh, ma'am.
Have you looked at the nursesjournal.org, Anil?
Never. Didn't hear about it first.
You should take a look at it. It's very interesting. You get to read articles written by, if you're interested in writing. Now, some people in this class are not interested in writing. As soon as this class is over, that's it for writing. You know, he and that writing go away. But it's still good to take a look at the website. Just note to yourself so that you know if in the future you might want to write about something, you would know how to do it. Even if you don't like to do it, but it's still good to know how to do it. It's just like me in math. I don't like math, but I still had to learn how to do it. You know, that sort of thing. Anyway, so here are the rest of today's presentation. We're going to write about this. I'm going to talk about steps in building a good argumentative essay, how to engage the other side so that your paper is fair and balanced and you avoid fallacies. Then I'm going to go over more about ethos, pathos, and logos. And then the last three things I'm going to go over are the three kinds of persuasive papers that you can write about in the Week 9 forum. You can write about a position paper, a call to action paper, or a problem solution paper. Now, if you don't want to write something emotional, let's say you want to just write about, and you don't want to debate something, you could write the problem solution paper. In other words, you just state the problem, you state a possible solution. Okay, you can leave your emotions out of it. You just state the facts. Okay, for someone who doesn't want like arguing. All right, that's somebody on this call. So yeah, and so she could then stick to problem solution paper, which is very commonly used in business writing and to write research papers. So if you get good at writing problem solution papers, you become really good at writing any kind of proposal, like a business proposal, research proposal, any kind of proposal, or legislation. So that's okay, so different kinds of claims in good argumentation. So in order to build a good persuasive argument, you need to know who your audience is. What is your purpose? Then you need to generate ideas and gather solid evidence. Develop a line of reasoning. Draw reasonable conclusions from your research. Make concessions. In other words, let the other side in. And then support each claim with your research and develop rebuttals. This is actually in your interactive lecture for Week 9, even though Week 9 is really, really short, but it's in your Week 9 lecture. And so we develop a line of reasoning. That means you have one central thesis statement in which you state the topic, the opinion, and the reasons. And your argument is a chain of reasons used to support a claim. And so an argument centers on a claim, a debatable statement that the reader can agree or disagree with. This claim, your thesis statement, becomes your thesis statement or main idea. So it's got to be clearly arguable, defendable, responsible, understandable, and interesting. Now, someone in this class thought that arguing meant we yell at each other and we argue and debate. And actually, it could just simply be as simple as, I don't think there is a Santa Claus. Do you? Wow, even when I was a kid, I didn't believe in Santa Claus. Really? You mean when you were a little kid, you didn't? Nope. I know someone like that who didn't even, and he didn't even like the song A, B, C, D, E, and so on and so forth. So there are people like that. And so that's it. You just simply disagree with something, and it doesn't have to be a big argument. But what makes your paper interesting is the fact that it is arguable, that people can debate it or can say they disagree or agree with it. So that makes the paper interesting. You need to be able to distinguish claims from facts from opinions. Oh, opinions. Gee, what's wrong with that spelling? What's the letter that's missing there? I wrote opinions. I meant opinions, but all right. So an opinion, a fact would be The Lord of the Rings was written by Tolkien. An opinion would be Lord of the Rings was my favorite movie of all time. So that's how you tell the difference between fact and opinion. So in a persuasive paper, you can have your personal opinion as long as you back it up with credible evidence. Okay, that's basically it. You have three kinds of claims. Okay, in other words, you have three kinds of thesis statements. You can have a claim of truth or a thesis statement of truth, such as the North Pole is covered by snow, or the South Pole is covered by snow. Claim of value. That would be a thesis statement of value. Is it worth it to get a college education? And so if you want to make a thesis statement of claim of value, you could say, going to college is not worth it because of the cost. So that's a claim of value. Now, the most common kind of thesis statement that we're going to be dealing with is a claim of policy. Should we or should we not have gun control? Then that would be a research question. Remember that the answer to your research question becomes your thesis statement. And so the thesis statement would be, gun control is necessary because. So you have three kinds of claims: claim of truth, claim of value, and claim of policy. And usually the claim of policy, you have the claim of truth and value intertwined inside the claim of policy. Okay, it's not all separate. That they often do overlap. So when you write your thesis statement, sometimes the three of them can overlap. And what else? Here are some more examples of a claim of truth, which is just telling you a fact. The Arctic ice cap will begin to disappear by 2050. In 12 years, if we cannot control climate control, we will destroy our environment. Now, some people disagree. That's because some people believe climate change is a hoax. So that is a debatable topic. The cholesterol in eggs is not as dangerous as previously stated. Women are just as smart and capable as men. You agree with that, don't you? Yeah. And avoid statements that are obviously true or impossible to support or research. A claim of value means that you put forth standards that something has or has not worth. So volunteer tutoring provides a valuable service to risk-at youth. Many music videos fail to present positive images of women, and Asian Americans are underrepresented in TV and movies. And so claims of value must be supported by a reference to a known standard, not your feelings. And so so a lot of the ethical topics under your persuasive ethics, that goes under claim of value, okay? Is it ethical to do such and such? Is it ethical? Those are the claims of value. Claims of policy, which is the one that most people are going to do for this class, is when we talk about special taxes should be placed on gas-guzzling SUVs. Marijuana should be legalized in all 50 states. So claims of policy focus on action. An argument over policy may involve claims of truth and claims of value. Avoid all or nothing claims. So we don't say all Chinese people are good at math or anybody is good at anything. You would say some. So you want to avoid fuzzy language and ambiguity and using slang and using text language. Always use third-person case. You want to have ethos, pathos, and logos. So when you look at other people's posts, you can say, John, your post has ethos, pathos, and logos. Ethos because you are quoting a scientist. Pathos because you make great use of descriptive language. Logos because you have a central thesis with supporting matching paragraphs. So you can use ethos, pathos, and logos to analyze whatever you read. And once you know how to analyze whatever you read, then you'll be able to tell the difference between a credible source and a non-credible source, and difference between fact and opinion. So what kind of claims is possible? What are the three kinds of thesis statements? Lisa.
You have the one of truth and policy and was it worth?
Value. Yeah, you got
Value.
it.
There you go.
Value. Which kinds of claims do you think you're going to make on your paper, or do you think it's interesting?
Well, I submitted the discussion one already, and it was on zoos. Mine's just more of just a statement that I believe that they're great, but
yours
yours
have an overlay of claim of truth, claim of value.
Yeah, mine's just
and
more truth.
Yes.
I don't feel like I don't like having any conflict of any kind, even though I stand for certain things that other people may not.
Everybody
it's
does.
just
Everybody stands
I hate
for
it.
something.
So I just don't like putting myself in that position. So that's why I chose, the topic that I did, more or less was safe.
Things like claims of value or claims of truth tend to be more safe than, say, claim of policy, because it depends on what policy you're talking about, because when you get to policy, it might get political to some extent. Although there are some claims of value that also gets politicized. So anyway, so those are the three kinds of, and why do we avoid all or nothing extreme claims? Anil?
I guess to avoid argumentative behavior from others, because if you're kind of borderline on that, some agree, some don't agree, but if you force just one side of it, then
Yes, that's one way of looking. Yes, and also to avoid stereotypes. Yes, you can't say all fat people are happy, for instance. You know, or all old people are incompetent and dumb, or something like that. So those are all stereotypes. You would say some people, some old people, or some bald people, whatever. You know, so you could stick to some, but not all. All right. So how to gather credible evidence, and so we're going to go over in week 10. I'm going to go over KAPOW. And KAPOW stands for, I'm going to go over it very quickly, but in week 10, KAPOW stands for currency, authority, purpose, objectivity, and writing purpose. And then you would learn, just like you learn to analyze ethos, pathos, and logos, you're going to learn to analyze everything using KAPOW. If it passes the KAPOW test, then you know that that source is credible and you can use it for your paper. So I'm going to go over that in the next presentation. So here is some general rules in order to find credible evidence. Use peer-reviewed articles from the online library. Avoid using Wikipedia. Gather statistics, tests, and experiments. And also I'm going to go over in week 11, how do you know those tests and experiments are valid? How do you know it wasn't slanted? How do you know it's not fake? And so I'll go over all of that also. Just like I tell you how to go over ethos, pathos, and logos, and KAPOW, I also will tell you how to go over a valid study, how to read a scholarly article, those sort of things. And then that way when you go read the Google Scholar, it becomes like this. And then gather credible evidence. You can use graphics, you can use analogies, you can use expert testimony. So make sure that the source that you're using is a scientist, a doctor, and not so much like an actor or a athlete, unless they're talking about their work. You know, they're talking about how to make a movie. Then you would listen to what the actor says. Or how to play basketball. Then you would listen to Michael Jordan. But if Michael Jordan wants to talk about something scientific, he might not be the best source. Maybe you want to talk to a scientist. So I'm not saying that Michael Jordan wouldn't know anything about science, but the scientist would simply know more about science, just like Michael Jordan would know more about basketball. So if you were to ask the scientist, how do you play basketball? That scientist who spends his whole day studying some microscope and no time at all on a basketball court, he wouldn't have ethos. He wouldn't have credibility. Okay, so we don't believe someone who's not an expert, because then they would lack ethos in the arguments. If you lack any of the three appeals, that makes your argument a fallacy. So you got to have expert testimony to have credible evidence. You got to have credible analysis and credible predictions. And so go for quality. Use pie structure. Make sure your evidence is accurate, complete, concrete, relevant, current, authoritative, and appealing. And then do not drown your reader with too many quotes. Avoid cherry picking your facts, and avoid having half-truths. A half-truth is when you just have part of the truth and you don't engage the other side. And so in order for your paper to be fair and balanced, you have to learn how to engage the other side, either using the Toulmin argumentation or Rogerian, which is the next section, of how to engage the other side. Avoid all or nothing dilemma fallacy. A fallacy is an illogical argument. So if I were to say that Prevagen, you should buy Prevagen, it's going to better brain, better life. Okay, now that kind of a commercial, like all TV commercials, they lack credible evidence. So therefore, it's a fallacy of relevance. Any kind of claim that lacks credible evidence is a fallacy. In other words, anything that lacks credible evidence is a illogical argument. Just like if you're missing, that means you're missing ethos. in your 3 ethos, pathos, logos, okay? So if you're missing credible evidence, you're missing ethos, in other words, credibility. That makes everything a fallacy, and that means you don't believe in it, okay? So we want to avoid fallacies in papers. I'm going to go over, there's hundreds of different kinds of fallacies, by the way, but I'm not going to go over hundreds. I'm going to go over the most common kinds of fallacies that you need to avoid in your argument in my week 10, how to find credible sources paper presentation. And then different kinds of evidence that's considered credible. So here are different kinds of credible evidence: observations, statistics, tests and experiments, analogies, making valid cause and effect comparisons, expert testimony, examples, and analysis. These are all considered different kinds of credible evidence. That's why a lot of students were writing all those percentages, because they were trying to present credible evidence to back up whatever claim that they were making. And so why must we have evidence to back up our claim? Anybody want to jump in? Why must we have evidence to back up our claim?
So it's just not our opinion.
So it's
Go
not.
ahead.
You got it. You can say it. She right. She got it.
So it's not just my opinion. If I were to say we all descend from Mars, but I have no proof, would you believe me?
Negative.
No.
You would be like, prove it. I want to see the proof. Proof is in the pudding, or something like that. So we always want to have credible evidence. What are some examples of credible evidence? Jamila.
An example of credible evidence would be, like I said, it would be like the facts, being able to say where we got that information from, something that's a known fact.
Okay. And how do we avoid misusing evidence? Anil, how do we avoid fallacies?
All right, hang on. Let me do this right quick.
You need to be, your microphone needs to be louder.
Okay, so where was I? Misusing evidence. Okay, so don't put every possible evidence that you find in the essay. Stick with just the relevant ones, and find a credible source of using the evidence.
Why must your evidence relate to the thesis? That has to do with logos, in case you're wondering.
Oh yeah, so exactly, because I mean, if your evidence does not match with your thesis statement, you're basically talking about things that are not even involved.
Right.
So the logical explanation for it.
If I were to use it as proof, I would say we are all descended from Mars, and then I suddenly say, did you know there's snow in the North Pole? Exactly. What does one have to do with the other? And I fail to point the relevance of one to the other. Then I end up with a fallacy of relevance. In other words, how is that relevant to the other? It's known as a fallacy of relevance. When you bring up something that's so off topic, people go, huh? Like that. That's a fallacy of relevance. You want to avoid fallacies of relevance in your paper. All right, so claims without credible evidence become non-credible sources. And so we want to avoid non-credible sources. So non-credible sources are things like rumor, fallacies, gossip, propaganda. Those are all, for example, President Xi of China thinks that he's God on earth, and everyone must worship him as God or go to jail, which is true. And so did President Mao Zedong, same thing. They would send you to a, anyway, so that's a example of government propaganda. And whenever you read anything about, and propaganda is when the government wants you to believe what they write, okay? And then only one point of view, which is just that point of view. And then they don't back it up with credible evidence. Or if I were to say, did you know that Linda is going out with the math teacher, and the math teacher is cheating on his wife? So that's just a rumor. You hear it from everybody else, but you don't have any credible evidence. You didn't actually see Linda going out with the math teacher. So that's an example of a fallacy. That's an example of making a claim without credible evidence. Another one are stereotypes. All Asians are infected with COVID-19 because they have slanty eyes. So what does slanty eyes, having slanty eyes, have to do with COVID-19? Anything?
Absolutely nothing.
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 So it's a fallacy of relevance. Yes, so we end up with a fallacy. So that's why we always have to, and also we look like an idiot if people instantly realize, oh yeah, you believe in Martians, huh? And people will laugh at you behind your. So claims without proof or evidence become fallacies, which are known as illogical arguments, which we will discuss in the week 10 lecture to avoid fallacies, bias. Oh, and also I'm going to talk about media bias and how to find credible sources. So, and then there are 3 kinds of fallacies I will discuss. We've already discussed a little bit: fallacies of relevance, fallacies of ambiguity, and fallacies of overgeneralization. So I'll discuss all of that. I think I'm going to do that next week or this week. Oh, it's this week. Okay. So I forgot. So a fallacy of relevance occurs when the claim or the claim that you make is false, such as slanty eyes has to do with COVID-19. So when you make a claim that's false with no evidence, that's a fallacy of relevance. Most TV ads present claims with nothing to back it up, because they just want you to, they just exaggerate something in order to buy the product. Like they would say that such and such a detergent cleans all stains because they say so. That's a fallacy of relevance because they didn't really do a study. Or Dentine is the best chewing gum because it gets rid of a bad breath. Says who? So that's a fallacy of relevance. A fallacy of ambiguity is when you have poor grammatical structure. So examples of fallacy of ambiguity is the bark was, let's see, the bark was rough. So could this mean that the tree's bark was rough, or a dog barks was rough, that it hurts the ears? All right. So how do you know what they're talking about? And so here you have, so the bark was painful. So could they talk about the tree bark? Or so if you're a lawyer, you would find the ambiguity in someone else's argument and use that to eat up the other side. Okay. So that would be weaknesses in someone else's argument, is you find that ambiguity and then you rebut that ambiguity, and that's what the lawyers do to each other, is to find. And also ambiguity has to do with misplacing your comma. Don't eat grandma. Let's eat grandma. So let's eat grandma with no comma would be let's go and eat grandma, literally like cannibalism, but then let's eat, comma, grandma. So that is also known as a fallacy of ambiguity. So if you have poor grammar and you end up with a sentence that doesn't quite make sense, that's a fallacy of ambiguity, poor grammatical structure. Fallacies of overgeneralization. That's also known as a hasty generalization fallacy. Overgeneralization fallacy is basically made when you make a claim based on evidence that is just too small. Essentially, you can't make a claim and say that something is true if you only have one example. So an example of fallacy of overgeneralization is Kevin's grandparents do not know how to use a computer. So Kevin thinks all older people must be computer illiterate. Jan is Chinese and her whole family is Chinese. They're all really good at math. Therefore, all Chinese people are good at math. Does that make sense? Do you know for a fact that every single Chinese person on this planet is good at math? You know 1 billion people personally? Yes? No? No. I don't know if anybody does, unless you're some kind of government leader. So that's why all or nothing, you can't make a generalization on too small an evidence. So that's generalization. That fits into stereotypes, and all blank people are negative adjective. So that's also a fallacy of overgeneralization. And then a cherry-picking fallacy is what occurs on TV when you have one news channel focusing on just talking about how Biden is such a great president, and then another news channel talking about how Biden is not a good president. This is known as media bias, and then they do it for ratings. I'm going to go over some interesting ones later, next week. So, Jamila, what is a fallacy?
You just said this.
Yeah, and what did I say?
It's not the one where you said if it's missing credibility, is it? Or is
Yeah, that's correct, that's correct.
Oh,
When
okay.
there's no credit, when you're missing one of the appeals, then it becomes a fallacy. It becomes an illogical argument. So are all TV ads fallacies, Lisa?
Majority of them are. I mean, some of them can be credible and some of them can't. I mean, I can't prove that all 10
Yeah,
dentists say,
that's an all or nothing, that's just an all or nothing claim. Therefore, that's a fallacy within a
yeah,
question.
it's like, I
You know,
can't say that all 10 dentists support it. I mean, and what if that
What,
person
what,
chewed the gum and they hate it?
what fallacies did you see in the 2016 election, Anil?
I guess that would be more of a cherry picking fallacy.
That would be cherry picking without having to say both candidates were guilty of telling the other side, your supporters are negative adjective. Well, yeah, well, your supporters are negative adjective, and you yourself are a negative adjective. So when you have people pointing at each other, that's known as an ad hominem fallacy, and instead of focusing on the issues, they just point at each other and call each other stupid. That's how children behave on a playground, by the way. They point at each other and blame each other instead of themselves. But anyway, so that occurs a lot. It's called mudslinging, but they have fancier terms. All right, so how do we engage the other side? How do we make our paper more equitable or less biased? So there are two kinds of ways to engage the other side. You got something called Toulmin argumentation. In Toulmin argumentation, you write one paragraph in which you present the other side of an issue. So let's say I would say, people who are for abortion believe blah, 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 blah. So you would write a whole paragraph on what they believe. And then people who are against abortion, but then let's say that your position is you're against abortion. So then you would write a rebuttal paragraph. However, abortion is, and then your opinion of backed by credible evidence. So when you just write, the other side and then rebut it with your opinion, that's known as Toulmin argumentation. So when you stick in the other side into your post or into your persuasive argument, then your argument becomes stronger because you acknowledge the other side and then you rebut it. Okay, rebuttal means that I've never been able to describe that. In other words, you argue point by point your point of view, showing all the weaknesses of the other side's point of view. Kind of like when you watch a trial, on TV anyway, or Perry Mason trial, where the clever lawyer is able to find the loopholes in someone else's argument, and then they're able to get their client guilty free or something like that. So Toulmin is a classic. That's known as classical argumentation, where you argue one side, argue the other side. So that's very combative. So Toulmin is used with, like in presidential debates, where presidential candidate A would say, I am for whatever it is, the topic, because. Oh yeah? Well, then the other person says, oh no, but I'm against because whatever. And then they rebut each other as well. That sort of thing. So when you watch a presidential debate, you're actually watching a debate or argumentation. Toulmin, it's a Toulmin argumentation for the most part. So Toulmin, no concession. A Rogerian argumentation is you concede that the other side could be right about some things. It's more like common ground. And then you write your rebuttal. So you would say, I concede, or I can see that your side of the issue is right because blah, 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 blah. Then you switch to your side and rebut. In Toulmin, you don't acknowledge anything. You just simply write out, this is what they think, this is what I think. And then it's very confrontational, Toulmin. And then Rogerian was developed by a therapist named Carl Rogers, so it's named after him, in which we try to find common ground with the other side. Because if we can find common ground with someone we're angry with, we can become less angry, or we can become less emotional. And so Rogerian argumentation is used a lot in diplomacy. When you have really delicate two countries are almost going to war, and then you have to find some common ground to get everybody to stop going to war. So Rogerian is used in delicate negotiations or highly controversial topics. And also Rogerian was used to be used when someone loses an election and the loser has to give a concession speech. That concession speech is a Rogerian speech because she has to acknowledge that the other person is the one to, fit to be president or fit to be senator or whatever, for whatever reason, okay? So that is when you concede the other side, at least partially, is right. And another name for Rogerian is common ground argumentation. So, and common ground is, going more and more in which you find what two sides have in common, and you try to make an agreement based on what they have in common. In other words, a compromise. Okay, so both Rogerian and common ground overlap a lot. And so here I write about Toulmin used in presidential debates, criminal trials. Rogerian is used in therapy, people in therapy, diplomatic and controversial and anything delicate. And when you make concessions, you recognize that there are some points of the other side that's correct. How do we make concessions? We use words like, admittedly, I agree that such and such could be good for you, and such and such and such. However, I think, then you use however to go back to your argument, and this you can use either as a turnabout paragraph in your introduction. In other words, when you introduce your thesis statement, you can write about the other side briefly, then you say however, and then you turn it to your thesis statement. That's one way in which you can introduce engaging the other side, okay? Whether you use Toulmin or Rogerian, you can use a turnabout paragraph for that purpose, okay? So if I use the Toulmin method in which I just simply state the other side, some people think, some people say, the proponents of abortion think this, this, and this. And then, however, I think, and then, you could do that in one paragraph, 5 sentences of the other side, and then you pivot, however, I think. So that would be a short way of doing it. Or if you want to make it longer, you can write one paragraph about the other side, and then you pivot over to what you think. So you could say, it is true that, granted, some people think that smoking is good for you, that smoking looks glamorous. However, research by Dr. you stick that person's name, and such association says that, in 2020, says that smoking is bad for you because reason 1, reason 2, reason, that's your thesis statement, okay? So we use these as words at the beginning of your argument, okay? Admittedly, it is true that, granted, you're right, I concede that smoking can be your whatever. Or if you listen to the early Obama speeches in 2008, he would say, I concede that we, the United States, we are a united people, and we will all strive to have or want a better economy. However, unlike the Republicans, now he's pivoting into his platform. Unlike the Republicans, we Democrats believe blah, 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 blah. So the early Obama speeches are very hopeful and very Rogerian. Okay, that's 2008. But then by 2012, if you listen to those speeches, he's become quite combative. In other words, he'll state the other side. The Republicans think such, 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 and such. However, I think, and he doesn't even bother to concede anything. Okay, he doesn't try to find by the time to. So you can listen to the difference between a Rogerian speech and a Toulmin speech. President Kennedy was, I think, famous for his Rogerian speeches, while other presidents were more famous for their Toulmin. So either way is fine. And so here is some examples of how you would use it in a turnabout introduction paragraph. So you would say, admittedly, smoking may look glamorous. However, smoking is actually dangerous to your health. I concede that smoking, in other words, you would write 5 paragraphs of I concede, and therefore that's the other side, and then you pivot over to however, and then your thesis statement. So you can use either the Rogerian style or the Toulmin style, and you can write it. So even when you concede a point, and how do you write a good rebuttal? You point out the counter-argument limits. You tell the other side of the story. You address logical fallacies in the other person's argument. In other words, you talk about what's missing in the other person's argument. and how can you argue it better? And then you can give a case study. Betty has something down her throat because she spent a lifetime smoking. And so unlike what the other side says, smoking and vaping is not glamorous and is actually dangerous or whatever. So you can tell the other side by having an anecdote or a case study. And then when you write a Toolman, you would use some say that, opponents say that, many people claim that, those who disagree believe that, many believe that. These are the things that you would say if you're going to use a Toolman, in which you just simply state the other side without conceding any points, and then you pivot over and talk about your side. And so here you would write, many believe that abortion is moral if a mother's life is in danger, or if the mother is carrying the child of the rapist. However, I believe abortion is immoral because reason 1, reason 2, reason 3. This was somebody's essay. And so here you would use, this would be an example of Toolman argumentation. Am I going too fast? No. And then here are some examples of Obama, which I've already said. And then here you have some people, here's an example of Toolman, in which I just simply say that some people say that using lectures is boring. Having only the teacher speak for hours on end and having the students just listen in is not good for learning. So here I'm talking about people think that lectures are boring. However, I think that lectures are interesting and foundational. I disagree with the claim that lectures are outmoded and boring. On the contrary, according to the book Dynamic Lectures, teaching by lecture is a vital way to teach people. It gives students foundational knowledge on an unfamiliar topic. Students gain mastery of the topic faster when the teacher lectures, and also lectures provide a faster way for teachers to teach the content of the class. After all, there are many ways to give a dynamic lecture through humor, multimedia, and having an animated presentation. Okay, so anyway, they're going to think that, so that's basically one way in which you can write. That's Toolman, in which I wrote, some people think that it's boring, but I disagree and think that lectures are not outmoded. Do you agree with that lectures are not outmoded? Yeah, because there are many different ways in which, so here I write about that you can either use, when you do this, you can either write it all in one paragraph in your introduction, or you could write it as 2 extra paragraphs in your body paragraphs. Then you'll end up with 7 paragraphs for your essay. So when we engage the other side, that's how we know that our papers are fair, credible, and balanced. If in doubt, always show 2 sides of an issue and then convince the other side of your point of view. Make sure that your argument has ethos, pathos, and logos. And so, Lisa, why do we engage the opposition?
Engaging the opposition, honestly, I couldn't remember. I know we just talked about it, but engaging the opposition, to me, I mean, it just shows that, well, you're a better person to engage the opposition. I just don't feel that.
One of the rules of engaging, of rebutting, is you cannot sound like you're condescending the other side.
Yes, I don't want to, I'm not that person.
You cannot say, well, my opinion is superior to your opinion. You have to say it in a way that's factual, not filled with so many personal, emotions. And therefore, if you state the facts, so you would state a fact like, some people think smoking is glamorous. However, according to Dr. Smith's research 2020, smoking is dangerous. So that's why we use credible evidence, because it's not your opinion. You're not pointing a finger at the other person's and condescending, saying, I'm superior to you. You're simply informing the reader that this is the way it should be done. Or in other words, you're just a font of information. And so that's one of the rules, is we don't condescend. That's why we stick to facts. That's what the APA is there for, because You would say, well, so-and-so said so based on the years of research that so-and-so did, and you back it up with with Dr. Smith, his date, and then you have your reference citation. So that's how you look credible. People will believe you and not think you're trying to be condescending. So that's where APA steps in. And so how does a concession strengthen your argument, Anil? Or how does engaging the other side strengthen your argument?
Well, you're agreeing to the other side to a certain extent, and then presenting your argument.
Yes, that's Rogerian. And then if I do Toulmin, how is that also? Which do you like better, Toulmin or Rogerian, and why?
I prefer the Rogerian side because if you agree to the other side to a certain extent, you've kind of brought down the wall.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. I had a student who had a very argumentative teenager. Now this teenager, all the teenager wanted was to be heard as an adult. And so when the mother was saying, you must come home by midnight because after midnight it's dangerous or something like that. And then the teenager, you don't think I'm adult enough to take care of myself and know what's dangerous or not dangerous, mother? And then they argued. After that, it just became, arguing. So instead, this mother, after learning about Rogerian in my class, decided to try it out. So she goes, well, I concede that, or I see that you are adult enough to know this, and this. And so they had a whole discussion of how she's an adult, and she conceded to the other side. And then she stuck in her 2 cents saying, however, I worry about you because, so she gently said, I worry about you, and that's why, to alleviate my worry, come home earlier so I know you're okay. So she conceded to the other side, and the teenager listened. People tend to listen more. So that's why I say that Rogerian is used for delicate, difficult people, delicate situations, diplomacy, or some kind of therapy, okay? Something difficult. And then if it's just some kind of common, like adulthood versus childhood or something not very, I don't know, emotional or something, you can use Toulmin. Do you understand what I'm talking about? Yeah. And so does that make sense? And how does presenting both sides prevent bias?
You want me to answer that?
Sure.
Okay.
I was looking for anybody.
Well, presenting both sides prevents the bias because, one, you're not agreeing with one person. Okay?
Yes.
And so you're presenting a middle ground.
I mean, you're agreeing to disagree. You're saying, yes, this is one side and then this is the other side. You're not agreeing to agree to anything. You're just talking it out. There is no, you're not taking a stance on one or the other. So it kind of just makes it, level ground for everybody.
Yes. And so if you have have you ever tried using Rogerian with your teenager?
I don't have any teenagers, but I mean, if I did, I probably would.
I'm gonna start doing it now.
You're using them now? You're using the Rogerian?
I'm going to start using it now.
Oh, okay. I had a student who tried it and she loved it. I didn't even realize it could be used that way. Here's about ethos, pathos, and logos, credibility, emotion, logic, and you need to have all three of them. It was Aristotle who came up with ethos, pathos, and logos. Ethos is ethics, establishing personal credentials, getting your audience to trust you. So ethos is believability. Pathos is to get the audience to feel sorry for you, inspiring an emotional response, getting your audience to feel for you. Logic is arguing with reasons and facts. In other words, it's not me condescending saying, I'm better than you. Okay? And as soon as you have that kind of condescending argument, your teenager is not going to listen to you. I remember when my parents did that to me. No, that didn't work. So, logic between, you got to try to sound reasonable, use facts, getting your audience to think. So when you want your argument to be valid, you have to have ethos, pathos, all three of them. And that's it. So Ethos is to build credibility, make realistic claims, projections, and promises, maintain trust. Logos, appeal to logic, engage readers positively, use a fitting tone, aim to motivate, not manipulate readers. Don't trash talk the opposition. Have a thesis with matching body paragraphs. Pathos, focus on your reader's needs. Picture your reader as resistant to your ideas. Use appeals that match the needs of your readers. Be aware of your audience. That's why it depends on. So here are some examples of ethos. Okay, so when Martin Luther King did his call to action, I have a dream, he has ethos, credibility, because he was African American. He went through what it's like to face racism and segregation. So he has ethos. Pathos means emotion. So all of those commercials where they want you to adopt a dog and they try to get you to do something out of emotion, that's known as trying to persuade you through pathos. And logos we just went through is case studies, autobiographies, anecdotes, okay? They persuade you by using credible evidence. So those are the three ways in which you can persuade somebody to do something. That's why these are the three ways, three different pillars of persuasive argumentation. And if you have all three pillars, you have a good argument. And if you're missing any one of them, and that's it. So if I were to say, I've never been a nurse in my life, but then I tell you what it's like to be a nurse, would you believe me? No, that's ethos. I lack credibility, okay? If an article did not have logical structure and was filled with spelling and grammar mistakes, that would be logos, would you believe that article? If I said, I is educated, for instance, I'm proving to you, I prove it to you, them is educated, I is. Okay, so that's appeal to logos. And you have to have ethos, so it's missing. And then if someone uses fear or fear-mongering to try to persuade you of a topic, we need to go to war because the enemy, they're so dangerous. We got to be frightened of them, so we got to pick up our whatever it is and go to war. Without credible evidence, that's pathos. In other words, fear-mongering, okay? So this is why a persuasive argument has to have all three, ethos, pathos, and logos. And so, do we believe an argument if I said, I know what it's like to be a man? So,
No, because you're a woman.
no, so Anil, do you know what it's like to be a woman?
No idea.
If a woman would say something feminine, would you say, I know exactly what you're going through? Would you say that?
No, not at all.
So here you're lacking ethos, okay? You're lacking ethos. Logos is when you have a central idea, and I said, I'm descended from Mars, but then I have slanty eyes, so I have COVID-19. Does that make sense to you? No. So that means I lack logic, lack logos. That's also a fallacy of, which of the fallacies are they? Begins with an R. E.
That one's the fallacy.
Relevance.
Relevance, yeah.
Yes, it's a fallacy of relevance. So it all falls under, it all makes sense. Everything overlaps with everything else. Anyway, so now I'm going to go over the last three things I'm going to go over are the three kinds of persuasive essays. You can have a position paper where you simply take a stand. So most position papers aim to educate and inform the reader and persuade the reader of their side of the issue. Topics addressed in position papers are debatable issues. Are you for or against an issue? What are the benefits and disadvantages of an issue? Is the issue moral or immoral? So here you have, is the issue moral or immoral? That's a claim of, is it a claim of value or a truth or a claim of policy? If I say it's an issue moral or immoral.
True.
Value. Probably.
Value, that's a claim of value. Are you for or against an issue or policy? Claim of?
Or against an issue?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, you're,
Well, you said policy.
yeah.
Policy, yes. Issue and policy are synonymous
Hmm.
in this case. So that would become a claim of policy. And so here you would have examples of position papers. Climate change is not a hoax. Abortion is immoral. Gun control is unnecessary. In the Chippewa Indian tribes, women are the stronger gender. Or nuclear power is not the answer for our energy needs because the risks outweigh the benefits. So that's clearly debatable. More examples. And so when you have a presidential debate, each candidate puts on his website his position on many issues. Those are known as position papers or white papers. And so when we vote for a president, we vote for the issues. And so if you're going to vote for Trump, for instance, you would go to Trump's official website to read what his issues are. Or you go to Clinton's official website to read what her issues are. And that's known as a position paper or a white paper of whatever their issues or whatever their positions are. Here's some examples of, this came off of President Biden's position paper. President Biden will deliver bold action and immediate relief for American families as the country grapples with COVID-19. This will include actions to control COVID-19, economic relief, tackle climate change, and advance racial equality and civil rights, as well as immediate actions to reform our immigration system and restore America's standing in the world. Notice how right after I wrote this, I put in Biden 2020. That's an Intext citation, which a lot of people were missing on their week 9 whatchamacallits. And then here, President Trump, from his website, over the past 4 years, my administration delivered for Americans of all backgrounds like never before. Save America is about building on those accomplishments. Supporting the brave conservatives will define the future of the America First movement, the future of our party, and the future of our beloved country. Save America is also about ensuring that we keep America first in our foreign and domestic policy. We take pride in our country. We teach the truth about our history. We celebrate our rich heritage and national traditions. And of course, we respect our great American flag. And then here you have another in-text citation where you have the author's name and date. And so here you have, those are, each person took a position. And so how do you use a position paper in your daily life? Lisa, have you taken a position on anything? Oh, you're muted. Still muted.
Okay. Yes, I have. I mean, in school and nursing, for one, nursing's a big one. I take positions in with like vaccines and medication taking and seeking assistance with getting help when you're sick and things like that. I mean, those are
You
I hold a
can write that.
position on those.
Those are good advocacy positions for writing for nurses. If you wanted to write an article for, I believe that such and such should be done, or I believe such and such should not be done. So that's an example of advocacy writing. Advocacy writing is persuasive writing because you're advocating for a cause. What characteristics do we look for in a persuasive argument to make it more believable? Anil.
Okay, well, are we talking about the ethos and logos?
Yeah.
Okay.
Ethos,
So yeah, so we're
ethos, pathos, logos, and that otherwise, if you're missing one of the appeals, what happens? You end up with what?
it would be a relevancy fallacy.
Fallacy. Okay. So, what is the most interesting or boring speech you have ever heard, Jamila?
You said the most interesting or boring speech?
Yeah. So, what made it interesting and what made it boring?
Oh, the most interesting speech that I heard was a few weeks ago. I went to a conference and it was the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. It was interesting because of the way he tied things into my personal life. You know what I mean? I could identify with a lot of things, without actually knowing him personally. You know what I mean? So that's what made it interesting. And the most boring speech I've heard was really, I guess it's not a speech, but just people who kind of talked in when they don't have pitches in their voice, it's kind of like one tone going across. What do you call that when it's just like one level to your conversation? It's just like blah, blah, blah.
They're monotone.
Monotone, yeah, girl, that's what
If I talk like this,
I-
and it's a great way for you to fall asleep.
yes.
Anyway,
Yeah, I can't get to if it's credible or not because I'm asleep.
Yeah, you don't care about whether it's a great way to fall asleep. You don't need the Calm app. You just listen to that professor talking. I remember in college there was a professor like that, and so people would tape record him on purpose just so they could listen to it to fall asleep. I mean, I'm serious. Back in the day, we didn't have cell phones or anything. We had tape recorders, so people would tape record him talking just for 10 or 15 minutes. And it was a great way for everybody in the dorm to just fall asleep. This was back in college. We were just kids. So anyway, so the second kind of persuasive paper is a call to action. The first kind of persuasive paper was to take a stand. The second kind of persuasive paper is call to action. A call to action is when you write such a convincing paper that you get the reader to jump out of his couch and participate in your movement, or go to a protest, or write a letter to the senator. And so after you convince your reader of your point of view, you persuade the reader to act. Call to action persuasive writing is very common in newsletters, editorials, marketing, business proposals, academic journals, white papers, and traditional essays. And so what are the good characteristics of a good call to action marketing proposal, Anil? You knew this was going to go to you.
Yeah. In a marketing proposal, we look at 4 P's, as we call it, which would be price, placement, product, and oh gosh, I'm forgetting the 4P. Price, placement, product, and okay, I'm forgetting the 4th P, but basically giving out the actual statistics about the product, and that would be
Price.
Yeah, so price. Placing would be how we're going to sell it, what kind of target market there's going to be. Okay, and so price, place, and oh my gosh, I'm forgetting everything. And then actual features of the product as well. So those are the things that would kind of come into place in such an explanation or essay.
Yeah, and so when we want to do a call to action, we want the person reading to actually go buy the product, or we want the person to go protest our movement, or write a letter to. So writers call for action because they believe change is necessary to fix a problem or correct an injustice. A writer's goal is to get the reader to care so much about this topic they will act on it to fix the topic. In academics, call to action issues would be to expand the art department, create a mentoring program, or on a political or social issue, shelter for abused women, or help people in a crisis, such as a hurricane, epidemic, or war. A good call to action argument has a compelling argument. The writer accurately describes the issue, convinces the reader of its importance. It has a logical argument, and it has a mature voice. In other words, the logical argument, in other words, it's ethos, pathos, logos. Compelling is like pathos. Logical argument is a cross between the way they say it's like logos and ethos combined. And then mature voice is more like pathos, okay? So that it sounds informed, it includes no manipulative appeals, quarrelsome argument. It's like pathos and logos combined. So basically you've got your pathos, ethos, and logos. To me, the best call to action was Martin Luther King. I'm not going to read the whole thing, just bits and parts of it. I am happy to join with you today and will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation. 50 years ago, a great American, in whose symbolic stand today, signed the Emancipation Proclamation. But 100 years later, the Negro is still not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled. You can hear when he says it, it's not repetitive. He says 100 years later, 100 years later, 100 years later, and he uses that in a poetic way in which to reinforce his point of view. So he uses it in a very flowing. It makes it flow, and he would say, we've also come to this hallowed spot to remind America of this fierce urgency to get rid of segregation, and to the valley of segregation, and to go for racial justice. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksand of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children. And this is the part that's most well known. Who wants to read this part of the speech? Anybody?
I'll read it.
Okay, go ahead.
It says, I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day, even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character.
And today, even with conservatives, this is the call to action everyone loves. He was so poetic. So he made a lot of people of a certain generation call to action. People got off their couch and actually went and protested whatever he believed in, even today. So this is an example of a call that he got ethos, pathos. He used pathos as when he said 100 years later, 100 years later, I have a dream, I have a dream. So he used repetition and analogy as a way to have pathos, which is render sympathy. Then logos is that he has one central idea in which he wants to end segregation, he wants to end racial injustice. So that is one central idea, is appeal to logos. And then the appeal to ethos is that he's a PhD. He's a Dr. Martin Luther King. And so therefore, it's a testimony of expertise. I forget, expert testimony, yeah. So this is, to me, call to action, and so that is an example of a call to action. I think that what other speeches in American history are also so effective, in your opinion? I'm only going to do one question, that one question. What other speeches, call to action speeches, can you think of? Just as effective.
Is it Abraham Lincoln's speech? Or, I don't know, it was a president. It was one of those presidents. Oh, wait, I lied. It wasn't Abraham Lincoln. I was thinking of like one of the war speeches. But when you think about the speech that, it just left me. The one that I really want to talk about. Pearl Harbor speech. The one after Pearl Harbor happened.
We only have fear, but fear itself.
Yes.
And this state shall live on in infamy. That line?
Yeah.
Yes.
Roosevelt?
Yes, I believe that was Roosevelt. Yes. Yeah. And this will be lived down in infamy. Yeah. Back then, it seems as if back then people had better speech writers than they do now. I don't know if it's because people don't know how to write speeches anymore or what. Maybe they need to take more writing classes so we can write good speeches again. But anyway, and Jamila, what's your favorite speech of all time? Anil, what's your favorite speech? I'll let Jamila think about it. What's your favorite speech of all time?
I'm unsure. I was thinking about a few different ones, but I really don't think I have one particular one.
Would you say it would be President Lincoln? Not President. For me, it's President Lincoln or President Kennedy. When President Kennedy said, "By the end of this century, we will have a man on the moon." So that to me is, and And the last kind of paper is a problem solution paper. You can use the block method or the alternate method. And so in a problem solution paper, you present the problem and then you present the solution. Okay, so it's that simple. So first you write down what the problem is, then you propose a solution to the problem. Proposals are prescriptions for change. As such, you challenge the reader not just to care about a problem or just to act upon a problem, but actually solve the problem. So here, in a position paper, you take a stand. In a call to action paper, you go and protest. But in a problem solution paper, you solve the problem. So it's like degrees of how involved are you in taking care of the problem, okay? Here you take a stand, you go protest, now you actually solve the problem. So those are the three, in different degrees, ways of a problem, of persuasive writing. And so problem solution is like when you give a proposal. This is how I propose we solve this problem. So proposal writers argue for remedies in all areas, from academia to social justice to medicine. And when I propose, for example, when the doctors propose the vaccine for COVID-19, some people agree with that, some people don't agree with that. So that's Toolman argument. And so you may write proposals to justify expenditures, sell products, or troubleshoot problems. In each situation, clearly define the problem, offer a solution, and explain how to implement it. And so problem solution. So what are problem solution essays? So problem solution essays consider the problems of a particular situation and give solutions to those problems. They are in some ways similar to the cause and effect essays, especially in terms of structure. Problem solution essays are actually a subtype of another type of essay, which has the following four components. So first, you describe the problem. When you describe the situation of the problem, you describe the problem itself. Then you find a solution and you evaluate the solution. This is the simplest, broken down in its four parts of a problem solution paper, a business proposal, a research proposal, or a medical proposal. Here's an example. So here we're talking about people who are fat. So here you're going to have the situation. Consumption of processed foods leads to obesity, and people aren't exercising anymore. And so here, obesity and poor fitness leads to decrease in life expectancy. So that's the problem. Obesity and poor fitness decrease life expectancy. Overweight people are more likely to have serious illnesses such as diabetes and heart disease, which can result in premature death. It is also known that regular exercise can reduce the risk of heart disease and stroke, which means that those with poor fitness levels are at an increased risk of suffering from those problems. Solution. Changes by individuals to their diet and their physical activities can increase life expectancy. There is a reliance today on the consumption of processed foods, which has high fat and sugar content. And I always tell students, if you want to avoid getting fat, you should cook your own food, because then you know what's going into the food. You know that you're not putting in the artificial stuff. You're getting it fresh from, well, as fresh as it can get without. That's another discussion, is whether the produce you get is actually got pesticides in it, but that's another thing. But they're saying that if you skip the TV dinners and just make your own food, take the time to make your own food, it's actually better for you, and you can then increase your life expectancy. So that's the solution to obesity and decrease. So here you have a problem, and then you have a solution. And then you have an evaluation. Governments should implement initiatives to improve citizens' eating and exercise habits. And of course, you remember the pyramid, the food pyramid. When I was little, they had the government had this food pyramid that all the kids had to go by in order to have a healthy diet. So yeah, the government did come out with those documents, and all the little kids had to learn what is good nutrition. So this could be done through education by adding classes to the curriculum about healthy diet and lifestyles. Government could also encourage their citizens to walk or cycle instead of taking the car, or by building more cycle lanes or increasing vehicle taxes. While some might argue that increased taxes are a negative way to solve the problem, okay? And this is her way of sticking in the other side, okay? While some might argue that increased taxes are a negative way to solve the problem, it is no different from the high taxes imposed on cigarettes to reduce cigarette consumption. So here she stuck in a little bit of the other side, and then she rebutted it saying, but it's no different than something else, and it will encourage people to exercise more. So that's one way in which you can stick in a little bit of the other side in order to rebut it doesn't have to be a whole paragraph, okay? You can stick in one sentence here in order to rebut the weakness of someone else's argument. And this is how you're, using the block method, this is how your would look. So here you would have problem 1, problem 2, solution 1, solution 2, and the conclusion is your evaluation. So in the conclusion, you would say that you would evaluate what more studies need to be done, what other solutions need to be studied further. So that would be the evaluation, just like in a science paper. I would say, well, I only did this, and this experiment, but more experiments need to be done in that, and that. This gives people who are reading the article ideas on what papers they should write. So that would be the conclusion, which is the evaluation. And so that is your block method of how to write a solution problem solution paper. And so a good problem solution paper should have an accurate description. You should have all reasonable solutions, such as history, side effects, costs, success, and failures. You should have a thorough analysis. The writer carefully analyzes the problem, and then she recommends the best solution with credible evidence. You make a claim with credible evidence. Then you have to have a rational argument. That's the appeal to logic. And so here you have to say in objective terms and present it in a measured, informed voice. That means not condescending and saying, you got to do it my way or the highway. Okay, they say rational. So when I read off all that exercise stuff, did I sound condescending? No. So you have to do it in a measured, informed. So when you write, you have to think of the voice. That's another topic. But you have to think of your voice. And you have to think of how you sound to the reader so that you don't sound condescending, because that would just turn people off. And so here is someone's example essay. He did a really great job. Don't you think, Anil, that this student did a great job?
Yes, he did.
Yes, he did. He did a great job. He put his thesis statement as the last sentence of the first paragraph. He had 5 sentences to introduce the thesis statement. He also did a great job with his topic sentence, which matches the thesis. So school uniforms enhance school spirit. So here he has in his thesis statement the same thing in his topic sentence. And he did the same thing to all his, let's see if I go backwards. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, so he did the same thing to all of his paragraphs. Everything matches. Now, what is missing in his essay? If I were to go and read this, does he have in-text citations in his essay?
No.
No. Did he need the teacher to put the in-text citations for him? Yes or no?
No, I should have done that.
Yeah, he's the student who wrote this. Anyway, so and so here, an example would be directly contributed to the feeling of school pride. So you mentioned Oxford Brookes University, but who did the study? Who did the 2000? So you need the author's name, and then you write, and then you can either write the author's name, Dr. Smith's study, 2007, from Brookes University, and then you write directly, then you write whatever fact, okay? And so
actually, there's no name for that person who did the actual study. It's just the Oxford Brookes University.
okay.
They're the ones who did the study.
Okay,
So-
and then if there's no name for the author, then you write in the website name, or you write in Oxford Brookes University 2007. You write in
But-
what you have.
Do I
question.
put the website in the paragraph, because it's in the bottom with the references?
Yes, you would put the website, and if there's no author name, you put in the website name and the date. Was that your question?
That was my question. I don't know. Jamila has another question, I guess.
No, my question is, so
Oh, Alicia, sorry.
I put one of the like I did mine on zoos, but it was just for like the forum discussion question. I didn't think we were putting citations in that one. I mean, are we doing that as well, or are we doing that one for the essay?
Yes, it's in your rubric. So the rubric came with the classroom. And so according to the rubric, you have to have correct APA and you have to have correct APA formatting. So if you look at your all the forum rubrics, it says
Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's why this
Because
person,
I read it again and again, and I thought, oh crap, I missed something.
and you're going to notice that as you read everyone else's essays, they all made the same mistake. People will write a whole thing and then stick in references at the end, and they confuse, thinking, oh, I put in my references. Okay, I'm good to go. When they forgot to also put in this, the author name or website name. And all you have to do is put in the website name or author name and date. You don't need to write in everything else within the parentheses. I'll show you other ways of doing it, but here I just wanted to show. So here, this person you can write it in like this. Here you have the National Association of Secondary School Principals, date, stated that, and then you have this person, then you have
So this was okay then, this part?
I corrected it. Whatever mistake you made, I put in the date, and then I think I rearranged your sentences so that it's now correct.
This one, okay.
Yeah, I corrected it. So I corrected it. So just to show you, but he did not have, he just wrote the principal. I think he left this out. And then he wrote the whole thing, I think in the middle of or something like that. So basically you write in who, or if there's no person, Chris Hammonds, and here you have the date. And you don't need to, you can if you, this is optional. You don't have to write a principal at Woodland Middle School, but that's okay. You could just write Chris Hammonds 2012 stated. Okay, that's good enough. Or if you want to add more, then that's why we have the commas there. Commas mean it's non-restrictive. It's extra information. It's not important. Okay, so you put a comma and a comma, so that's a positive. And so then uniforms do not simply identify. So anyway, and then you could do it this way too. So here, let me show you different ways. And then of course, you know about how all of this is missing your, the author name, last name, author name, and all that. So it should look more like this. So you did some of them right, some of them wrong. This is how, these are different ways in which you can have signal phrases or in-text citations. You can either just have the quotation and then write Smith and date, or you can have Dr. Smith states, and then you have the date at the end, or you can have Dr. Smith 2007 states, and then you have your. So those are three different ways in which you can have your in-text citation inside your paper. So this is inside your body paragraphs. So let's see if I can go backwards. Ooh, that's cool. Let's see. And so here, inside within his body, the only thing I can't show you on PowerPoint is I could not double space it. PowerPoint wouldn't let me do that. Well, without taking up too much space.
Well, yeah, I didn't. I read the how about like what you have to write about and stuff like that, and I just didn't even look to see. I didn't know that there was that little 3-dot thing. I read it, and then I pushed it, and nothing happened. I didn't realize it was at the top of the deal. Oh well.
Well, you could always add in your in-text citations again if you want to repost. I mean, that's okay too. So here you have President Clinton. You could put 1996 advocated for the use of uniforms in his state of address, or you can write Clinton 1996. So many different ways of doing it and of putting in your in-text citation. So the in-text citation inside the body paragraphs. And then reference citations is, he did that right, at the end of your paper. But then you have to add in this person's name. This has to be italicized. I couldn't figure that out I think you could do that in PowerPoint. Then you write in the website name. Then you write retrieved March 8th. And then you write your website name. So that's why I've been getting a list of just this part only from students and then missing all the other parts of the reference citation.
In this situation where you said, Patrick so-and-so, then name of the book or article, and then it says private school website, but then you also say from the school's website. Is that the same thing?
Yeah.
But so you must do it twice then?
Yes.
Okay.
It's different from a book. A book would then say what the publication is. You would say Raleigh Publications or something like that. And you wouldn't need retrieved anything from anything. So that would be the difference with a book. You don't need this last part, okay? You just need this part up to the publication, and you need the date. Oh shoot!
So,
Did I forget the
so
date?
on,
See, I forgot the date on this one.
yeah, 2007.
Yeah, it's 2000. It should be 2007. I forgot to put that in. Oh well. But the date would go right here. I just noticed, so I'm gonna have to remember to do that. Anyway, so what was I gonna say?
So one more question, in fact, before we
That's it.
go for.
And then we're done. This is the last. I think this is the last slide. What? Yes. How can I help you? Which question? Who has a question?
Oh, my question was with regards to going back to the citation when it comes to references. Okay, so if you are taking a quote from a book, you have to write who published that book and what year they published it.
Correct. Yes, you would write the same thing. You would write Smith, Patrick. You put whatever the year is, then you put in the article name. The only difference is that here you would write Raleigh Publications. And then that it would end right there.
Okay.
And then if you have a journal, then you would write medical journal, page edition 5, volume 3, page 22, whatever. It would all go. It would all go over here. And then if the journal happens to be online, then you write retrieved March 8th from something something something. So that's whenever it's retrieved something, that's usually something you got it online. And if it's print. In the old-fashioned APA, you would write print and web, but you don't have to do that anymore. You'll notice that older articles will have that. They'll actually have Raleigh Publications, print. So before 2009, I think that's when they changed it. Any articles that you find that's older will actually have the older version of APA. So older versions of APA actually wrote in. You got to put in the word web over here. You don't have to do that. You don't have to do that anymore.
Okay. Our post for this week and the one for next week, I mean, are they to be different essays?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So for week 7, 8, 11, and 12. 7, 8, 11, and 12, that's your comparison contrast essay. And then 9 and 10 is something else. Right now we're on something else.
I know, but the one for this week, the persuasive essay?
Different. It's different from the comparison
week
contrast.
10.
10 is another assignment altogether. You're not going to be writing an essay next week.
Oh,
You're going to be filling out a worksheet. So next week there are no essays. You just have to. We're going to practice.
Oh, that's what got me confused.
Yeah, that's why I said 7, 8, 11, 12. That's the writing process of comparison contrast, and then just remember 9 and 10 is something else.
Okay.
And otherwise your brain gets overloaded. Well, at least mine does. And so this is what we just did. So what kinds of persuasive essays do you like best? Position paper, call to action, or problem solution? Position paper. What about you, Anil? Which one is most interesting to you?
I went with a position paper, but mostly a position paper because kind of persuaded just on one aspect of it.
Okay, yeah, it depends on what you want. I mean, a lot of the social injustice issues seem to do the call to action, and problem solution is when you're doing legislation. For example, the problem of stop Asian hate, for example. And then the solution, at least partially the solution, was President Biden had legislation against anti-Asian, becomes a hate crime. Okay, so that was the solution. Problem is the hate crime is and you have the problem of prejudice against Asians due to COVID-19, and then the solution was a bill saying if you do that sort of a hate, it's a hate crime and you can get prosecuted or something. So that was the problem solution. That's an example of a problem solution paper. And so here I just say, in conclusion, having the skill to persuade people and have your way allows you to be successful. And so here you would have ethos, credibility, pathos, care, and logos, competency. And so that's it. How do you like the class so far?
Good. Can you send this to us as well?
Sure.
It's able to be sent to us because it's the very beginning where you showed us the proper how to cite like APA in the
Oh,
paragraph
yeah,
and at
yeah.
the end so that I can like see it while I'm doing it.
Okay,
'Cause
okay.
obviously I submitted it, my post without it because I didn't think it
And
was
also,
needed, but yeah.
and also for your comparison contrast paper, you are required to have at least one in-text citation and one APA as well for your comparison contrast paper as well. That's on their rubric. And this is my references, so you can see that this is how your references are supposed to look like. So I use those references for this presentation. And then I put it in alphabetical order, B, K, L, T, and V. And so that also needs, the only thing I didn't do, which I can't do on, is formatting. This is supposed to be left hanging indent, and it has to be double spaced. And I couldn't do that on, I can do that on Microsoft Word, but I can't do that on this. Do you have any questions?
No, I think we're good. Well, I'm good.
Good to go?
I'm good.
Okay.
I've got to go fix my problem.
Yeah. I don't think you have a problem, but I think you're both doing great students, and I hope to see you again next week. Next week we'll be doing the credible sources worksheet, and the first thing I will teach you is how to do the credible sources worksheet. I always do that first because that's when everyone's still fresh, you see. By the time you get to the very end, people have gone to sleep, as you say. Even if I'm not monotone, but people's attention span, it says that for Zoom, it's about 10 minutes, you're fresh. If you're face-to-face 3D, then 30 minutes. People can actually pay attention to someone 3D for 30 minutes, you see. So that's basically what the research, that was that dynamic lectures book I was telling you about. That's what they said. So do you feel that after 10 minutes you start to drift away? Well, then
As long as you keep asking questions, nobody should be drifting away. That's the key
Unfortunately, I think
to
the one girl
speaking.
the one that was in the class earlier in the lecture, she was falling asleep, and I wanted to tell her, if you're gonna sleep, turn your camera off.
Oh yeah. That's a good watch. I would go to a like if I go to a seminar and some people have their cameras off, I would wonder, are they sleeping or not? Some people are eating, or some people are feeding their child, as in like this, and they don't want to have to wear that what did they call that? Anyway, so some people are doing other stuff and vacuuming or something like that. So
Or watching your soap opera like today.
yeah, can you imagine soap operas are still in as the world turns? As the world turns, is that a sentence, complete sentence, or is that a fragment? As the world turns.
It's a fragment.
That's a
It's a fragment. He knows his Anubis now. Anyway, so I'll see you next week, and same bat time and same bat place. Okay?
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.